Haha, Mark and I are both lurking in our own meeting. Hey man.
Hello there.
Hello.
So are these both you, these other um, noting things?
I don't know. I've been trying some app things. I haven't really got the hang of it. So it's akin to having what is that robot doing in our party situation?
Well, I'm not too fast. I worked on the premise that if we're recording these anyway, they're being recorded somewhere. So.
Yeah, I did. There was somebody who joined us a while ago and has been trying to do this, and I've denied those. If you are not in the meeting, then I feel a bit spied upon. We must have the opportunity to choose what is uploaded and so on.
Well, I think it's nice only in the thing that if you have something that's running and because presumably what you can't necessarily tell is if you have something running and then you have to drop out or you have to you want to sort of turn off the recording for a bit, whether the noting thing is actually honoring that. It probably isn't.
This is true. And look, we have Rob here, back from a strenuous trip to civilization.
Yeah.
Mark, do you know, uh, well, have you read the books Origins or Being Human? I think we
um
talked about them.
the yes, a while back. Or I've been through parts of the Yuri, I can't remember his name now.
Lewis Dartnell.
Oh, the dog. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Morning,
Um,
everybody.
Morning. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Rob,
Hi, Deanie.
Rob is back. Rob is back.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, guys. But hang on, before we start the meeting, Deanie, is that an American flag on your collar?
No, it's a Hawaiian t-shirt, Hawaiian shirt, vintage.
That's probably the coolest shirt I've ever seen. Can we green screen mine away? Oh my God.
Vintage.
Wow.
I had one that was even older from the 50s and it got accidentally sent to Goodwill. Somebody made a lot of money off that shirt.
Hmm.
Hey, Rob, how was the crossing? Was it fun?
The crossing was fun. I caught a cough and it's just beginning to go away. So
Aw,
that
but
was
it
the
was fun
down.
though. Was it worth doing?
It was worth doing. It's doing once.
That's great. It's good to see you again.
Good to be back.
Been a
It
while,
was
yes.
it seemed longer than it was, or it was shorter than it seemed.
Hmm. Something like that.
Well, we had a good time in Canada. Very
Yeah.
successful.
No, sorry, I was just saying, yeah, we really want to hear about that. Sorry, the lag is a bit funny.
Let me close the door so that I don't disturb John.
Okay.
There we go. Who else is coming this morning?
That's a good question. Very good question. I have no idea. But we are a good group.
And
So,
Mark, did you get your article finished?
yes. Yeah. And I've nursed Gabbo over the line as well. So and Fred has paper in, so that's 4. And I don't know if Peter. I'm not sure. Did you put one in? So there might even be 5 from our august body. The one we didn't do was the sort of demo thing that I was doing. I would talked about doing with Adam in discussion with him. We felt that probably wasn't enough. I mean, it wasn't enough to be worth making a demo, a formal demo out of it. I mean, we're still going ahead with some stuff, but it was more effort than it's worth to do the paper.
that's fair enough. Uh, the later deadline was Saturday. I also thought it was the 24th for some reason, but that is not correct.
No.
I did actually cite your paper, Peter, so if I get accepted, I'm going to have to make you an addendum to the paper, or you could submit later, of course, to something. I don't know. Hi, Fabian. But Dini, how was it? How was the week?
It was so good. We let me start though. Before we went to the event, my lab was invited to be one of the few labs, 4 labs that were on a tour for 80 people. Every university in our system has an advisory council. And so they all converged onto my campus the Thursday before I left for the conference. And so my team gave a demo discussion, show and tell to 4 groups of 20 people. And attending the first one was our new provost, and the provost is the chief executive officer for academics at a system. So brand new provost, starts July 1, came to my lab and he walked in and he said, "Oh my God, this is incredible. I'm so excited. Look at all the computers, look at it." And then we showed all the things we were doing. He was just beside himself. And I'm going to be honest with you, somebody that is in that position with that much funding to like disseminate and who can protect my lab from, bad things. He wrote me a nice note afterwards and he said, "I really want to come back. I want to come back and play games. I want to come back and see more." So I just was so delighted. Then we left on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday to go to Canada. And I gave a talk. So it was a week-long exhibition. So we're on our feet showing stuff to people as they came in the door. But also a whole class of people came in, 24 people, and I gave a lecture on Thursday. And then I gave an institute lecture on Friday to about 200 people. So it was busy, busy and fun. And we drove back on Saturday, long ferry ride. And I just slept like a dog at night.
There's
I
no
see
better-
conversations taking place. Let's see. Let's stop and look at the chat.
there's
Good
no-
morning, Bunching. How does the mission go? I think the human on. I was looking, Mark, that page. Okay, so all right. Thanks.
There is no better sleep, Dini, than after that kind of a week. So especially when you get the sea air at the end of it, there is something special with that.
Well, anyway, so I know you guys want to talk about the paper submission, so I'll stop, but thank you so much.
No, I don't think we do. I think there's just after Peter's comment here about that link, it does actually say June 30th on there, Mark. And Mark, you know everything in this world. So what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, human is Klaus and Jessica's domain. So if that's what it says, I assume it's right. The other deadline was all just the in a sense essentially the late breaking parts of Hypertext 24.
So what should Peter do? Email the paper to Klaus maybe, and then Klaus would probably say, no, you have to do this way.
Well, if it says June the 30th, that's the deadline, you could always email Klaus and just say, "Is that correct?" And he'll either say no or yes, and you can sort of take it from there. If it's broadly ready to go, then they may just, you may be able to slip one under the wire. If it's still got stuff to do and it is sort of, it was this weekend, it's probably not worth it. It's probably not worth doing it at this point. Rob.
Can I ask when we're going to be able to register for Hypertext 24?
Good question. Well asked. I just saw something from Marius over the weekend. They're just finalising the sort of booking page for it. But there will be a page up, I would imagine, in the next probably in the next week or so. And there will be some early bird pricing in the sort of same as ever. Not a great amount, but a little for those who know they're coming anyway.
Okay.
If I see anything, I'll stick something in the Slack.
I'm trying to coordinate that with another conference right after it in Finland, so.
Sure. Well, I mean, the conference formally runs from, it's actually overlapping with the second day workshop. So if you wanted to go to some of the workshops, because one of the things is trying to arrange that human and narrative weren't overlapping of the various workshops, because a lot of people like to go to both those particular two. So whether you come Monday through Friday or Tuesday through Friday is sort of up to you, but we should be done. The conference is normally done by about mid-afternoon on Friday. If you then got to tear off, presumably you're going straight to Finland after, right?
No, a friend of mine from Poznan is going to be there and meet me for that weekend, and then I've got to go to
Oh,
Finland.
cool. Okay, right.
Or I may just do the Zoom meeting in Finland,
Sure.
not go there. 'Cause it's,
Anyway, if I hear anything on the actual bookings for Poznan, I'll share the link.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's good. No, Peter, just email him right now saying you're about ready to submit, because the only way you can submit properly is if you bribe Mark. Mark knows all the things to do with this. The procedures are awful, and
well, that's not certainly true in this case, because human is a workshop, so it's entirely under Klaus and Jeska. I don't actually have any involvement in it.
but you know how it should be done.
Yeah, but I don't even know how they're doing the submissions, whether using EasyChair or something else. I just don't know.
I think I submitted to that. Blue, I don't know. I'll just email him. Right. Anyway, Dini, we really want to hear more about the week. This is the kind of adventures we live to make happen.
Yeah, it was great. So we had about probably maybe 150 people through the event, and then I had 24 people coming for the class. The URL is this, dhi.org. You can look at it. It's a series of classes, so it's 2 weeks long. I only went to the second week. Courses are being held, TEI, Python class, stuff like that. Anyway, but I had about 150 people through the exhibition. 24 came for a lecture, and then I gave the Institute lecture on Friday afternoon. There were about maybe 200 people in that room, so it was good. And so I got to talk about hypertext like crazy. And Mark, I first thing I said was, how many people know, because I had a picture of Ted Nelson and a hypertext thing. I said, how many people know hypertext? And everybody's hands went up. I was like, thank God. I was thinking I have to stand there for 20 minutes and explain hypertext to these people.
It's better than having to explain why it isn't the web.
Yeah, the DH people are kind of a mixture between humanities and computing. So they're pretty savvy, most of them. We had fun. We visited the pub often. There's a pub, and we stayed in the condos on campus and walked every day to the venue. So it was great. I got a lot of exercise. Walked everywhere. It was fun. But I got home and I just was like, oh my gosh, I have a house. I was living in a dorm room half the size of this office. So it was nice. But thanks for asking. Where are we on the project? How's everybody doing?
Today, we're going to honor the request of minimum project talk. We have, where did he go? We lost Leon. Leon was going to present something. He's coming back. And then we're going to struggle really hard not to mention the S word, Sloan, although I'm sure it'll come up. And I just wanted to say that this is what Mark and I were talking about briefly. So one of my heroes, Lewis Dartnell, who wrote Origins and Being Human. Origins is about how the planet shaped us. It's absolutely phenomenal work. Shockingly, he replied positively to coming to the symposium. Now he's looking for funding how to do that, so I've emailed to see if I can find some of that. So we'll look into, and Dini and I have to prioritize. Obviously, you guys are the are the most important to get over there. But I haven't gotten many responses from new people yet, so I was very excited by that. So if you have a look at the books, you may find them interesting. And I see there's a yellow hand in Brussels.
Yes, hello everyone. This is my yellow hand. I want to not talk about not only Sloan but not even XR. I attended a conference last week called SplinterCon about a splintered internet, or how internet is being fractured. Yeah, just briefly to do a short ad for it, because it's been quite interesting, honestly quite challenging, because it's not my expertise, so that made it even more interesting, and also politically, I want to say, important. Basically, I think all of us here were in the quote-unquote West, and we forget that, yeah, I just arrived home, connected to Zoom, and then started to chat with you all, see your faces, and I didn't have to go through a VPN to talk with to people on a different country and continent than I do. But that's not how a lot of people experience the internet. So there were a couple of reports from people in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Cuba, also Ukraine, Russia. So that was very interesting, again, politically and technically, like how such internet or part of internet are being segregated, for what purpose, how it's being done. So I really recommend checking it. I'll put the link in the chat, but it's called SplinterCon. It's the second time it happened. The first time was in Montreal, Canada last year, and this year in Brussels, Belgium. Honestly, a little bit overwhelming, because sometimes I'm like, okay, what's the point of all my geeky, nerdy prototypes when there were such immediate needs? So that was also a little bit, something to see or experience, I guess. And also I mentioned it as a little one of the consequence of the conference was like, well, hopefully it's not going to happen, I don't know, to Belgium or Western Europe or the US next election. But if it might, that's the kind of thing, without sounding like a prepper, that one must be aware of today. So in topic of resilience, like knowing what, I guess, a VPN is, or knowing what archive.org is, maybe having a copy of Wikipedia, or whatever, again, people are. And Frode, you mentioned earlier, like you gave a link to somebody who lost their domain and thus has kind of lost their presence on the internet. It's sad that we have to be mindful of such things, but we have to be ready before it happens. Ideally, it never happens to any of us, but it's already happening to quite a few people. So yeah, SplinterCon, revealing, emotionally draining, intellectually too. But yeah, I really recommend checking the conference and similar events around you, and considering participating. Always more resilience, basically.
It's interesting you say that, because at our DHSI, there are courses that focus on, persistence, the web, and the notion of lots of copies, keep safe. And so when I was doing my presentation on Friday to the Institute, these questions arose from the group, and it's a big concern. We're losing so much on the web. In fact, there was a report that in China, 1/3 of the websites have disappeared. And of course, the answer here is that unless you're being crawled, our sites are being lost here too. So hanging on to things. One more thing I'll mention is on Friday of last week, we had just completed the reconstruction and restoration of a work called Red Mona, which was published in 1997 on the web, right? It's a web-based work. It went outmoded when the CGI scripting was no longer held on to it's no longer supported by the browser. So we had to rebuild the entire work so that it was using JavaScript. And then we re-released it for the web. And here's this work that was on the web, it was crawled. So we have the original website. What we didn't have was the interactive cards that appeared with it because they were all randomized through CGI scripting. This happens, it's happening more and more with web-based works. Mark's shaking his head. So how do you stop this? I mean, what do we do to mitigate this problem? And the answer is you can't. You just can't save it all. And I've got a stack of books on my shelf over here about, everybody's saying we can't save it all. So how do we go about saving the thing? So the big question I was asked in the Institute was, how do you curate what you save? And the answer is, I don't. I just, whatever's coming at me first, I save it. I save it fast and furiously. I do not say this work is better than this work, so I'm saving this one first. I just save it in the order that the fire is burning the brightest, going as fast as I can. A lot of it too, Fabienne, is about age. It's the age of the artist. And Ramona was made by Christy Sheffield Sanford, who's 83 years old and has had 2 near-death experiences in the last year and a half. So, I mean, I'm saving a lot of people that are older, whose work I think is important. And I don't want to see, the work go away. And I want the artist to help me with it. There's one artist whose name I will not mention because they don't want me to out them, has cancer, stage 4 cancer. And so I'm trying really hard to get their work documented and done. So it's a problem. And one more thing I'll say is that I'm the only lab doing this. And I'm trying to train people as fast as I can, but there's just not enough money to do what we're doing. It's a real problem. And I can't get the government agencies in the United States to put money towards these kinds of efforts because they're so focused on STEM right now. There's so many needs. This is not a big deal for them. So anyway, it's a problem. Thank you, Fabienne, for that link.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't quite understand servers. To me, a server is something that should serve, not store. I think it's in the name, so we should really invest in peer-to-peer and all these things. And of course, Fabian is it was Leon who wrote it. Leon is completely right. When it comes to documents, whether PDF or otherwise, it should be in a format that can be downloaded and kept on your own whatever system. I think that is really important. And I came across a point by someone else the other day who said, how can we give our digital assets to our descendants? Like even family photo albums. They're on one thing, maybe Google this, and then you have legal documents on some other server. It's really, really bad. But the mentality is, if it's in the cloud, why worry about it? And Apple, I think, is one of the worst companies because it gives you a real benefit of using iCloud. It's just that it's really easy because you have really little control. Fabienne.
Yeah, briefly, I also put it in the chat, but there is another conference I attended last year, I want to say, where I invited to speak about 360 videos in PeerTube, because PeerTube is a peer-to-peer solution. It means people watching or basically gradually getting their own copy of the video they want to watch. And eventually, if they have their own server, they can also share it back to people. So in terms of archiving content, peer-to-peer solutions are interesting, as also Leon hints on. There was also a browser called Sino. I'll put also the link, but I think you might be able to see it. There are a couple of solutions, and one of those browser, Sino, is based on Firefox. But what it does is when you use it, it starts to get a local copy of content and share it back with other people. Thank you for sharing, Leon, on the chat. It starts to basically share the copy to other people of the network. And that means if, for example, the page we're trying to reach is blocked by whatever reason, technical problem or not, then you still can have the copy from the network. And that is important in such cases because, yeah, it's for political reason. Just briefly, there is a distinction between archiving the content and making it accessible at all. One is like keeping it over time, basically. And one of the trick, let's say, that people in the No Time to Wait conference or community tends to use are virtual machines. So if you're, because it, as computing power grows over time, instead of trying to adapt, you can put a fake computer inside a real computer, basically. And it's cheaper than having somebody going to port a library or so there is a lot of work about emulation, like emulation of video games, basically, because you can't like if you watch somebody playing a video game, you're not playing the video game. So if you record a video of a video game being played, it's not the thing itself. It is by definition interactive, and you need to preserve not just the game but the execution environment, like the computer with all its even bugs, for example. You need to preserve, because maybe some people were able to exploit those bugs to make a kind of new kind of game in the game, and it is part of the thing. So you cannot have just static content. And a recurring pattern that's in such cases has been emulation or virtual machines, a way to have like a fake computer inside a real computer, even if it means throttling it, so making it running at a slower pace, because of course the newer computer is faster. Also, like some kind of blurriness, like CRT monitors were blurrier. And then video games back then were using the blurriness as a kind of anti-aliasing technique. And like, how do you reproduce this? So there is always this kind of challenge of preserving over time with the context, with the execution context, especially for games and interactive pieces. And how a simulation and emulation is not the thing itself. So it's trick of the virtual machine, and yet it's far from perfect. But yeah, it is such conferences and the communities to me are so fascinating and again important.
This is exactly what Mariusz Pozarski and I talk about in our book that we published just this past year on challenges. Things like throttling the speed, trying to capture the sound. So one of the things that people were remarking about, because we had old Macintoshes, SEs and things like that at the exhibition, and people sat down, they couldn't believe the sound, the whirring sound, the trying to find the hard drive, that kind of stuff, and the sound of the keyboard, because it was really clicky sounding when you typed it. But that was part of the beauty of that work. It was part of that visceral experience. So Mariusz and I talk about how to keep that alive in the works that we recreate, like when we reconstruct something. So when the lab did Richard Holton's The Figurski Project, we created 2 reading environments. One that was the classic, so it looked like the 9.2 Macintosh environment. And then you toggled over and saw our contemporary. And so you can go back and forth, and we tried really hard to capture a lot of that 9.2 experience, Fabienne, in that work. So just trying to keep up with that kind of the beauty, the kind of interesting aspects, the physicality of those works. So
it is interesting. I noticed we're about to go into, I think, Leon's demo, but just riffing on this thing of keeping stuff. This Mac here, I mainly keep because it's my last Intel one, and it's the only computer I have that will run VirtualBox, which is what, amongst other things, I've got microcosm running on that one, one or two other old systems. But something I didn't see coming was the fact that because VirtualBox uses an Intel underpinning, so at the bottom of all the nested dolls, the thing keeping it afloat is effectively wants to run off a Windows thing. And I'm thinking about that in the context that I know when I first started looking at virtualization and people said, well, you just, and I said, well, let me stop you there. I don't just, you have to explain what this means. Virtualization sort of isn't actually quite that simple because you have to start thinking about where things get put. I was thinking, in fact, a question that came to mind as you were talking about the IPFS stuff is that as to where the information is stored. Not that it matters where it is, but I'm thinking that so man and woman in the street, Uncle Joe, whatever, and you said, right, you can do this, you can make a copy of, say, all the family photos. That's one thing. But whether they know where that's stored, because all too often you find these things that carefully put it in a sort of hidden folder because that's how they roll, because they were designed by technical people who understood about these things. Whereas most people just don't, and therefore need an outer layer of sort of handholding to expose that. And indeed, you might say that it ought to be sort of made more visible or have an option to be more visible in some cases. Because it's things like, you know, are you storing it, but possibly in a place that it's not getting backed up? You assumed it was, but you didn't know, because there's never something that says, oh, by the way, you know, this enormous sort of bundle of data stored on the end of your drive that you didn't know about. That's not being backed up. Nothing tells you that. And if you're not savvy enough to know, which is most people, then you know, badness can happen.
Mark, we back up the files for the next nightly, and it goes into the cloud, and then we also back it up on hard drive weekly. So it's constantly being backed up. And then I carry a file here. So I have it here at the house. So if the university burns down, it's here. I'm getting ready to send out a copy of the next to my colleague at the University of Toulouse. So I'm starting to share the folder, the whole thing, so that other people have it in case the United States burns down after Trump is elected. That's my biggest fear.
Shouldn't be funny, but well, I will just share another experience like that I discovered during SplinterCon. Is so people in Cuba, for example, they were doing I forgot the name, but they were basically sharing around a USB stick with PDF and other documents in order to like tips and tricks and whatever content. And so they physically have a USB stick that they pass around because internet there works and it's actually not too blocked, but it's crazily expensive. Like they earn $30 a month, and then internet is like $10, and like it doesn't make sense basically. So they have to find ways to spread information in another way. And one thing that I learned then during the conference was, besides sharing physical devices like a hard disk or USB stick and having kind of peer-to-peer network, a physical one, what some people do is called also satellite data casting. So they use the satellites, physical satellites high up there in order to beam to Earth, basically pretty much everywhere, but at least in a couple of areas where people would need it. Such kind of packages, like static files that people can then like both software and documents in order to either share the data itself or seed then a local network where people can then use peer-to-peer with radio antenna or USB sticks. So it's quite interesting to see how like some quote-unquote old ways like USB sticks or satellites or physical hard disk being mailed around in such cases where you need resilience basically still works. It's still a good option. So yeah.
Leon,
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, I thought I'm gonna throw in a small demo. It's sort of related. I mean, the similarity of all these things and the sort of the effects of data getting lost has a lot to do with viewers and applications not being able to recognize the technologies used inside a certain container format. So HTML is a container format of all kinds of media. If you don't use that and you just use text and just the HTML stuff, then you're totally fine. So there is a bit of a, there's two ways to create HTML. It's like fast food style that will break easily over time, or robust HTML. And I think this creating robust websites which which work and last for a long time, I think that's very important. And I think archive.org is also a bit of a test bed for that. If your website works well on archive.org, then you're probably fine. And another thing I also noticed is that so if things are encapsulated in one file, let's say a PDF or an HTML with embedded images, or a ROM, a Nintendo ROM file, which contains the whole game, then that is usually a safer bet, because it's it's a bit more contained. And in this same philosophy, I also sort of like started to focus on XR fragments. And I wanted to show you something. I was recently talking with a university from Holland, who is, it's the Han University in Nijmegen. They are focusing on accessibility and 3D. They reached out to me, and they were curious about my ideas, like how can we make 3D more accessible? And well, I basically had some ideas, and there was one use case they suggested, which is basically a person in VR without hands, maybe no sight. Like how, like what is the minimum, what is the lowest common denominator to control a 3D scene? And I came up, or we came up with the following solution. I will share my screen. We basically came up with a 2-button navigation. Let me see this one, the window, this one. So can,
Yeah, I can see that.
okay, can you see that? Okay, that's
Mhm.
great. So basically what you are looking at here is a 3D model, a 3D model file. Just like an HTML file, it contains some extra metadata, the XR fragments. And if you press Tab, you can see a small box appearing around the clickable or the interactable items. Maybe that was a bit too fast. I will also show the link in the chat. But basically, if you press Tab on a keyboard, yes, a keyboard, it turns out, yeah, it's too easy to think that people will consume VR, XR stuff with the hand controllers. There will be a lot, yes, but yeah, the keyboard won't go away either. People with certain accessibility problems, they really need to press a button. Maybe they cannot move their neck. So there's all kinds of other requirements. So if you press Tab, you can basically, in your headset or on your laptop, you can see the interactable components or objects being highlighted with a box. And if you press Enter, you will basically activate that link. So this was an internal link, a hash link, which basically takes you to a different place in the document, just like a 2D HTML fragment. And I was even able to create a quiz 3D model, basically a model with some interactions, with some href links. And again, using the tab, I'm now pressing tab, you can see the welcome text is now highlighted, because that has an area description, which shows you basically in a notification, welcome to this e-learning, blah, blah, blah. These are area descriptions. They are also in HTML. And this is to basically give some extra context to people who might have a screen reader or need to read something in a certain font, bigger font, etc. So these are just extra tools, extra metadata to create this 3D accessible experience. And yeah, you can also cycle through the buttons, and it's all context based. So if you're like in this space, it will only scan the nested objects, the 3 buttons in this case, and the text. Those will only be candidates for the tab key. So you can have a huge 3D model with many worlds inside and still just be able to tab through only the buttons or elements which are necessary for that subspace in the 3D model, basically. So I think I exceeded my 1 minute expectation presentation, so I I thought you might like this.
Absolutely. And Fabienne, please go first.
I'm wondering if you tried also using, it's Candid. I don't know if for accessibility it's better or not, but supporting the Gamepad API, because in the browser you can have just like a normal gamepad. It's kind of surprising, but if you go on a web page that supports it, like I've been to, there is something I think called Web or Frame or something, and then you have like a dozen of consoles, and then some public domain rooms. You just start playing with it, like nothing to do, nothing to install. And I say this because I tried it and it works basically, but also because I think that's some of the support pattern of such devices. So I'll put a weird one in the chat called Mouth Pad. And the idea is that you put a kind of pad under your palate, and then you use your tongue to navigate around. And for some people that can't use their hands or other body parts to navigate, like it sounds. I even asked if I could get one to try. And anything in terms of work, it's so I also put a link to a demo I did a couple of weeks ago, I want to say, because I was surprised by how quickly it is. So I don't necessarily recommend this. Like if of course you can move around with your hands in space and you don't have to use a controller, better if you don't. But if you must for whatever reason, and it's supported by the WebXR page, suddenly a lot more people can use it. And even again, as I tend to reiterate, even yourself, like if you're in the train and you don't have the space to move around and you have your gamepad with you, or you have a device that includes this and even think about it, it just works.
So from an accessibility standpoint, obviously very, very cool, both the mousepad and the tab. I talked to Leon briefly earlier today. We had our times confused, so that was nice. So we got a little half-an-hour chat that's referenced in our Slack now. But it's I think what is so exciting about the opportunity now is we have to think all kinds of entirely new things, but also some of the old stuff, like Windows first gave us Command Tab or whatever it was before Macintosh, and it's so useful. And I know we're talking about just tab here, but to look at physical things in an XR environment, I think is really useful because our hands aren't designed to only be in space. So I think we should free ourselves in our community to have fun thinking about basic hardware. And also, I think it was Logitech who just launched a pen for XR. I put it in Slack. I just saw it on Twitter earlier today. But yeah, no, it's exciting. You know, you should be able to be in the swivel chair 360 just with your hands. You should be able to do word processing and things in between. So, you know, tab is one solution, but also other ways. I saw an interesting presentation. Someone the other day said they think Hollywood, it's the second time I've said that. They said that Silicon Valley's bet on voice is maybe slightly misguided for some of the knowledge work, because voice is quite vague. When you're doing knowledge work, you want to be able to select exactly this and do exactly that. Of course, our discussions are a bit more nuanced. Sometimes voice is all you need. Sometimes it's useful. But anyway, I just got so excited when Leon mentioned the whole, let's not forget that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was a lot. Fabienne, please.
Yeah, briefly. On Steam, for example, which is a game platform, they sell games, but they also do quite a bit in terms of accessibility. For example, making games work on Linux rather than just Windows. But what they also do is provide mapping between a kind of controller, let's say this, and a game. And if, for example, somebody has a controller kind of like this, but not exactly the same, then the community can share it, and then people can upvote it, say, hey, that's a good layout, it's a good mapping, or it's not. And I'm wondering if that could also help that each WebXR or whatever XR experience accepts such a mapping, and then for some people maybe they can't press such button and they would remap it before. And if it's done outside of the experience itself, like not a menu that say, hey, map it this way, map it that way, I imagine that people that need it, they have a custom software on their computer that allows this. And if in the URL you can say, hey, that button does that action, that means a lot of experience could, from this, be adapted to the user, and people would share just the mapping. Just say like this controller with that action does this, and the experience would support this. I'm wondering if that could also be an option, like as Steam does it for players.
There's a related issue, thinking about this, because I'm thinking, sorry guys, for our Sloan work, the simple act of when you are in reading mode, you don't necessarily want other interactions to be as easy. So for instance, to be able to tell the system even now, when you have a Bluetooth keyboard, you don't want any virtual keyboard, at least for Vision Pro. System sometimes gets confused. I'm thinking even for what we're doing now, if someone happens to have a gamepad or something like you just showed, and they are now clearly reading, there's no reason a joystick shouldn't be able to work. But you know, the interesting bit is, of course, how do you then focus out so they don't feel stuck holding this one page and go over to other things. What a great notion, though. I mean, imagine after we've done this work next year, just to use ourselves as an example, we have a full mapping. You know, if you enter an environment with only hands, this is the gestures. If you have a Microsoft gamepad, you can do this. If you have an Apple keyboard, you can do this. So the system just accepts many different ways.
That could be the next grant proposal.
Yeah, Dini, you're brilliant with this. And I think the funny thing about accessibility is it can be a bore, but of course it benefits all of us. And that's the thing.
One thing we did talk about in the proposal was accessibility. And I know I brought this up a long time ago and people didn't want to talk about it, but I'm glad to see us having a discussion now. Thank you, Leon, for bringing it back up and for everybody being excited about it now. It is something that's important. It's not, I would disagree, a bore. It's a bore if you are able. If you're disabled, it's not a bore.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
Accessibility is, I mean, if we get the NEH grant in the lab, the entire grant is devoted to accessibility and making the NEX accessible to everybody, including those that are physically disabled and have sensory sensitivity. So $310,000 if we get that grant for that purpose. So hopefully somebody else might think it's interesting. Andrew
yeah.
says Dini's done a lot with accessibility in her work. Yeah. And so we also developed the metadata schema, which seems to be catching on with a lot of folks in our community, the schema for people that are sensory sensitive.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, Leon, just a brief back with Dean. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, and it was funny. It was earlier today when I was, for some reason, thinking of how lucky I am with certain things in my life. And I was thinking I should make a T-shirt that says, it's not easy not being me. And then I realized I do represent, you know, well-off, white, middle-aged male, all of those things. Whatever aspect we're looking at, either physical disability or cultural disability, of course, it is really, really important. The only point I really wanted to make is whatever things we help, whether it's someone, you know, I know someone who's missing an entire hand, whether we support them or something else, the interfaces that come out of that really do come over to everybody. So that's why I was using that language. But I think we're entirely on that same page. And I think now is a great time to start talking about it, because earlier on we were kind of flailing about and we didn't even know the basics. So, but now we haven't implemented everything, so it's probably a good timing. So yeah, we're definitely on the same wave on that one. Leon.
Yeah, these are good points. Sometimes I'm even thinking that it's the key, it's the only doorway to true innovation or real innovation. Because I don't know like if you start to play a musical instrument which can do everything, like being a trombone, being a keyboard or a drum, basically make a computer with a laptop, you have superpowers, but it's also super distractive. Like if you limit yourself, and I guess that's what we do if we design for accessibility. I think if we limit ourselves, that's like the exact moment where creativity sort of gets is born almost. I have a feeling if like all these possibilities, I also see that with programming languages. Like if you have like 100 programming languages to choose, and they have all so many ways of doing many things, sometimes it can be really great to and sort of creative to start with a really simple programming language, let's say an old one, which has a lot of limitations, but that really seems to get the creative juices up and running very quickly. Whereas if you use some kind of super recent programming language, you feel like instantly stupid by just looking at the at the tutorial. So I think, long story short, I think this accessibility focus can also be seen as a sort of like lowest common denominator and innovation starting point almost.
Well, not many people are doing it, Leon. So if it's the lowest common denominator, it's still not being done. And so it's not low hanging fruit, unfortunately. And a lot of it's because there's so much that needs to be done for it. You know, everything from like, okay, what if they don't have hands? What if they can't, what if they have hands but not fingers? What if they only use their, what if they only use their tongue? So there's so many aspects to this. And so it becomes very difficult to capture all of it. And so that's part of it, right? And it gets exhausting. Then you have to think about sensory sensitivities. And the work we're doing in the lab, we track down every one of the color blindness issues, from can't see blue and green, oh, see green but not blue, oh, see red but not green. There's so many variations of it. So being able to come up with a color palette strategy that addresses all of those colorblind needs. And that's something that Holly in our lab is an expert in. So she can run things through the Apple tool, knowing exactly what somebody that can't see yellow can see in that space. And so there's just so much to it that it becomes exhausting, but it's definitely not easy. And that's why hardly anybody's doing it. Universal design is the easiest thing to do. But what we're doing in the lab is universal design on steroids. And it costs a lot of money. And the $310,000 that I'm hoping to get, well, it's just a drop in the bucket of what we really need, right? So that's
Absolutely.
good that we do it.
Absolutely. And as Chris Gutteridge, Mark and my colleague in Southampton pointed out, that some disabilities in other cases are superpowers. And, he's got his own issues with that. And I find that an interesting perspective, but also smaller things like I'm redesigning some of the visual aspects of Author to make it more readable after having heard some comments from you guys. So I was sitting just the other day and looking at the dark mode, not wanting to make the background black. For my eyes, that's too severe. So I showed it to a student who absolutely wanted it black. She said her eyes absolutely suit that. So a lot of it is such personal variation too. So that's why the term accessibility should probably be widened to be very far removed from only having to be with disability. Because look at the way even the people in this room, the way we read, we have such different preferences for how things should be presented. So it is basically making sure people can access the information in the way that suits them. In fact, that's an Apple commercial. Anyway, Mark, at least it was in the 90s.
I was just
Can I
thinking,
drop
in fact,
I was
sorry,
gonna
Diddy,
drop
go ahead.
something in the I'm gonna drop something in the chat here. This is what we did to map out sensory sensitivities and disabilities. If you look at that link, that's the control vocabulary for everything and a description of everything from content timing to text format, color and contrast, visual impact, auditory, touch, lots of touch issues, haptic feedback, repetitive motion, movement and gesture. These are the things that Richard and I, the Mellon Foundation funded us to go for a week-long retreat to develop this controlled vocabulary. So once we came back, the Society of American Archivists gave us a pot of money to do a proof of concept in the next. And then we were taking that for the NEH grant to fund it. So if you check that out, you can see the work that we've done to do everything from like even facial recognition, spatial peripheral manipulation. I mean, these are really important stuff for us to think about. Eye movement, just frequent gestures. I mean, any people that get carpal tunnel syndrome from doing the same thing over and over again. How do we avoid these problems? Cursor clicks, stuff like that. So, and we've applied this to the next. So if you look at the next, you can see that some of the works have already seen this kind of metadata imposed on it. I'll put
It's interesting to see the breakdown you've given there, because my sort of comment in the chat a few minutes ago was along the lines of, I mean, I haven't had to do anything from sort of ground up in terms of design for assistive stuff, but I tripped across it in the past where it normally came up after everything was finished. And my observation always at the time is maybe this isn't the time to start thinking about it, because it always becomes a thing of what you're taking away, or it gets unintentionally ghettoized where you have this solution for people who have this sort of lack facility, you have something completely different, which of course just creates load. Whereas the observation it left me with was, well, one of the things that forces you to think about is even if not everyone acts in the same way, but if you have a limited amount of things you can do, you need to know at any time, what is the most important thing that I need to be able to do to move ahead in this, which you forget when you have, two hands and all sort of thing, and you have no primary impediments. You just don't think about it because it's such a rich environment you live in. But if you don't have that, which to me is interesting because it sort of turns the whole design process around, because in a sense, if you can design for that chain, that primary thing, if you know what that is, then I think it's much easier to navigate along it using a whole host of different devices, because they're different things, but they are working to the same effect. And it shouldn't necessarily be detrimental to the overall enjoyment of people who have no impediment.
Yeah, and I would say the exhibition I just dropped into the Slack channel, the URL, this is the works that we applied the metadata structure to. We're not changing the works, but we're telling people in advance what's going on. Like if you're going to look at this work and you have sensitivity to blinking, know that this work blinks at that 2 minute, 20 seconds, so that they know to step away from the work while it does that and then go back to it. So we're not changing the work. We're just letting people know in advance what to expect. This is the same kind of process that's used for, it's called, it's accessible symphonies and accessible performances. So it allows people to know in advance, like when the symphonic band, when the symphony starts using a lot of brass or drums, know that gets loud at this moment. So it lets people know in advance what's going on. That's all.
But I do want to stress that I think one of the things that's coming out of the conversation is kind of a reminder, nothing new, but the paper that I submitted was on high resolution thinking. And I made the point that if you have high resolution metadata, you can have high resolution experiences, which comes onto this. And I'm realizing that an addendum to that is high resolution experiences need to map back to the individual body. We really are all so different. We are way past the industrial one size fits all. And it's really, really exciting to highlight this today, because the work Andrew's doing, it becomes kind of a whatever we agree on thing. But I think maybe we should be more sensitive to when we disagree and try to provide solutions for more than one case. We've already done it with how we're trying to deal with right and left-handed people. That's kind of an obvious one. We have to provide for both. But what about other things like, yeah, anyway, it's a lovely discussion.
I was reminded of that yesterday. I was sort of gardening, and the one thing that you really do not work left and right hand is scissors,
Yeah.
because of the way they're constructed. It was stupid. I was just trying to cut bits of twine to tie up tomato plants, but your natural handedness means I always ended up with the scissors in the wrong hand, and sure enough, they didn't cut. Then you had to take everything down. So, yeah, so it can be remarkably minor things that can create quite a stumbling block.
Well, an example for you and Klaus, of course, is your friendly disagreement on the use of 1 or 2 columns.
What? Say it again.
Mark will.
So no, Klaus is somebody. I remember when I said 2 columns should be taken out, back, and shot, and he was really quite upset. No, so I think it's really nice. And yes, there's a separate conversation to have about how we get to that point. But yes, I think he quite likes it.
Yeah, even basic preferences like that, they are really important. And if we look at athletes of any high performance level, if it's a biker, they will have a custom designed bike seat. No matter what it is, there was a lot of customization. Fabienne is the knowledge worker equivalent of that. Make it really fit your body. We all have different levels of dexterity with our hands, even, for crying out loud. And by the way, Andrew, the interaction you have with the pointer, let's just not call it anything else. Someone tried it the other day. I finally had a chance to have someone try our stuff, not just the general vision. And in the beginning, they didn't get it at all. They were really quite annoyed, and I was very upset. We had to reboot the page. That was it. When it worked, it was fantastic. It's just like, yes, this is pointing where I want. Oh, okay, I point like this, I do this. So that was hugely successful. So that is one of the things that, there was some disagreement in the group in the beginning, to use that language. And at this point, I think it's probably worth taking out that code, putting it separately on GitHub for others to use, with you as the creator, obviously. It is definitely, I would say, a major contribution from the Sloan project, because basically everywhere else is rubbish. I don't know what you guys think, but that's my perspective. What do we do?
Andrew.
I got a quick question because it's user feedback, so it's always really useful to hear. And thank you. When you said that the first time it didn't work until you reloaded the page, was it just a sense of there were no hands? Because I know WebXR periodically just fails to get the hands until you reload the page. And I don't know why, but I'm working on it. If that was the case, that would make sense. If you had hands and no pointer, I don't get it. I need to look into that.
I think it was just a mess because the page hadn't been used for a while.
Oh, okay. That would explain it.
Yeah, there's nothing to do with you. This is about Safari. Yeah. Sorry, no useful bug report. Yeah, it's really surprising. So this tab thing is really annoying. It's an insight that, on one level, I think is so obvious. And I mean, come on, guys. Actually, starting maybe with you, Fabian, putting you in the spot because you're in the center of my screen. What hardware, if we wanted to invest a tiny bit of money, could we make that would be useful? Just as a thought experiment. What would you like?
Hardware, like any kind of device for anybody to be able to use?
I'm thinking about you're standing inside our system, to have that as a great starting position. And you've been working for a while with pointing and doing this. And after a while, your arms are going to get a bit tired. But also, you want to grab something. You want to have a different kind of control. You want to author something. So you grab a thing. What kind of thing?
Well, actually, I think from what I don't think you're going to find that exciting, but for example, from what I remember from, how do you say, like discussion with a researcher on physiology, and they were basically advocating for change of posture. So it's not
Sorry, I didn't hear
about
that. Change of what?
of posture.
Oh, okay.
And basically, he was advocating not for a single tool, but for, let's say, going from let's say, speech to keyboard to hand tracking to controllers like that. So my suggestion, without necessarily specifically hardware, and to echo a little bit the discussion we had until now, would be by supporting a vast array of different inputs, keyboard, speech, gamepad, controllers, hand tracking, etc., and being able to, as fluently as possible, go from one to the other. I think that would be what at least in terms of physiology would be best. And for example, the last thing that we don't have to build ourselves, but I think Logitech is selling soon is a pen for XR, so that you can sketch in XR and draw and whatnot. So that's what I want. That is not too like far-fetched into the future, but not that, for example, use the pen and then you can't use hand tracking. Or if you have the pen, you still be able to, for example, speak and then I don't know, you write the post-it note on the wall and then you can sketch around it. But basically being able to have such an affordance that people, including me, are used to, so a pen in 2D or even 3D, and combining with everything we discussed until now.
Yeah, mix, important. Mark.
I was just wondering if partly what you were hinting towards is the fact that, you know, if you look at a standard sort of computer keyboard, whichever brand you happen to use, but essentially we have a small number of accessor keys that do an awful lot of heavy lift for us, especially for someone who's a skilled, you know, touch typist on a keyboard, on a computer keyboard. So all the shortcuts, and so that's one thing. So I can be in an XR environment, and I've got these, but what my hand doesn't have is it doesn't have an Alt button or a Windows key or those sort of things, and it's sort of shorn of that. You suddenly realize that a number of things you do sort of actually go through the you know, basically you need that extra prompt, and I think that's sort of what I took away from thinking about things like the sort of tab and being able to do, you know, Alt tab or Command tab or whatever it is, that we're feeding our way to. So what, you know, what else do we need? And now whether that's a soft feature, whether it's a thing you hold or something, is again for discovery. But I think the underlying, going back to the sort of sense of, so what's the generalized problem model underneath? It seems to be that one of the things that we don't get for free with these is any modifier keys.
A quick comment. So I started to tinker. I think I showed it last week with a speech in the browser, and thus in XR. And what I found was pleasant and maybe surprising. So I think it's a trade-off. Like you need to learn it, for example, keywords and whatnot. But what was surprising and positive way was to be able to do both, like speak and then a sphere appears in front of you. But I didn't also say move sphere right, for example, or translate X right. I grab it and move it, and being able to juggle between both as a way to some of the things that I don't want, let's say, to press buttons or whatnot. I just say it and then I move it, and every time I can go between both, that's been surprisingly efficient. Even I thought it would be very quirky or whatnot, but I think if the action you're trying to conduct, let's say moving a thing, can be done with the right gesture or form of interaction, and the other, say, add a new object by speaking, or it's like I didn't have to think about it. Now I say it aloud because I had to reflect a little bit on the actions I took, but there was no thinking there involved. So I don't want to be naive. That's why I say I don't know if, in terms of training, if it's because I thought about it a lot until I actually did, and then it felt natural, or if anybody without considering any of this would also have the same experience. But that was surprising in a good way.
One of the things to think about, of course, is to as we talked about in the beginning, but revisiting for this discussion, we have a table. For our basic mode, we absolutely will not. We will have a swivel chair, and it's not expected that your arm should be in one place rather than another. But if you have a table, then you have a substrate. So one of the nice things about WebXR seems to understand things now, so you can work on a surface like we talked about. But I guess you could also have more control mechanisms on there. But even if you don't, even if it's your gesture, to rest your hand and do this, probably more control than holding it in the air. So, you know, can the table literally give us support over it? Over to Fabienne, over. Leon, you're pointing to Fabienne, it's funny.
Okay. So I'll briefly share my screen in order to answer this, because I don't think I shared it with this group. So let me know, please.
Oh,
if
you just
can-
shared with your other groups, huh? Are we not your special?
You're not going to be the jealous type, are you?
No, not at all.
I'm glad this is on record. So can you see my screen?
Yeah, can see it, all of us, right?
Super. So it's one of the feature of the Quest, the latest version. I want to say version 64 and above. For the Quest, I think only 3, because of its depth sensor. You can scan the room and you have a 3D model of it, but then you have those things like shelf, table, screen that you can barely see. So that, first of all, that's the thing. I'm not sure everybody's aware of this. What's interesting for us, though, specifically, is that your software can know that this 3D object is a table. So here it looks a little bit untractable, but you can have primitives, so it looks like that instead. And then if you forget the background, which are the walls, or the green part, which is the 3D model, what you see here, for example, is my desk in purple, my screen in light blue, and an art piece in orange-ish, I guess, or pink. And what you can then do to answer the table part is I'm back in my office, I've hidden the rest, and then now I only show the art piece and the non-wall object. And when I release, when looking at the table, and now while looking at the art piece, it throws it there basically. So it's now possible in WebXR to use some of the elements that your environment is composed of when you do the room setup, and thus add things to it, or like snap post-it note, or toss a ball, or whatever you want with it. For such an experience, let's say a demo at a conference, that means that the person who is just going to have the experience, they are not going to be, so the room setup takes like 2 minutes. It's quite fast, but for a newcomer, it's a little bit like it's an extra step, even if it's done automatically, most of it. But it means somebody trying such an experience, let's say at a conference, it would feel, I think, quite good, and they would be able to, once they've been convinced by it, say, okay, I can take 2 minutes to do a room setup in my office or home or wherever. And then, yes, you have new affordances, both physical, like you can rest on your table, but you can also use it for like semantic, meaningful work. Let's say that the post-it, if you toss them on the floor, for example, they were deleted. But if you look at the desk, then they are maybe arranged with a certain layout, or if it's on your screen, there is a fan out that goes around the screen, not on it. So I think it gives a lot of new interesting affordances.
Absolutely. Leon.
Yeah, I was just thinking what about what Fabienne said and what Frode said. Like Fabienne was talking about a sort of like a real world room setup. Frode was talking about a swivel chair, and I just realized again how many how many situations and scenarios there are, and will be even more. And then take Dini. I'm looking at Dini's ELMS link, with all these different, basically user profiles. Like this is so so complex that I think there is something missing right now with all these WebXR websites, is that you have like a button, it says enter VR, but you have no idea what will happen. Before you know it, you're in a roller coaster, something which I really don't like. And for some reason, people keep making these roller coasters. I don't know why, but I think in the future, 2000 years from now, people will still do this. Anyways, I think maybe this pop-up should be sort of more mature, maybe with like what to expect. Like it will, maybe the experiences should always start in swivel chair mode, and through a menu you can maybe sort of add controllers or a different keyboard, but there has to be some kind of expectation at the beginning, I think.
Absolutely agree. I think we have it nicely now with that little sphere explaining it. It could be better, but imagine how insanely incredible it would be to combine these views. So imagine someone in the Hypertext conference puts on the headset and they look around the room and they see the room they are in, and it looks very nice pass through. And all, just for the sake of theater, all they have that is virtual is one single thing, maybe even lying on a table that represents the proceedings, the work object. Once they lift that up, they get an option to go into full VR to be swivel chair interaction. So there is an elegant way to go in and out of these modes now that we have that opportunity. I don't know, Deanie, what do you think about that?
Well, we've been experimenting with the idea of having two ways to make it clear what's happening, right? So you have the descriptive paragraph that says, this is what you're about to see. Here's what this work is, and here's what it entails. And then you have the control vocabularies that gives real specific information, the metadata. So pairing those together gives you a thick description of what you're experiencing. So I think that it's great to have the information that we have on the ball, but there should be a landing page that says, here's what this environment entails. Here's what if you have these needs, here's how to view these. I mean, we can do that. That's not hard to do, and it would be really useful to lead that discussion among our colleagues that are working in XR, right? There's not a lot of that. And you're right. I've been to the Shard and went through the VR environment that's on the Shard. When I was in Dubai, I did the VR experience at the top of the largest building in the world. I've done them wherever I go, and they're always about thrill, always about, climbing up the side of this giant building or jumping off the building. It's nothing that is interesting intellectually. And what we're doing is not that thing. We're doing something else. And very few people are doing something else. And so it's our opportunity to really define what that is and take advantage of it.
Mark, do you mind if I just address that briefly? I do fully agree with you, Deanie. I do think that similar to the discussion of different input mechanisms being, you can easily go from one to the other is important. I also think that our core experience will absolutely be in the cylinder that we're building now. But if it turns out it isn't that much of a leap to be able to go into AR as well, I think it'll really provide an experience of, what's that word? Memory palace. To have something virtual on the wall and how these things connect. Because one of the problems that AR, VR, XR will need to address more in the future is how different apps work together. So I think that kind of gives a hint, as in you can be in something and go to something completely different. Because currently in XR, you have either a native app and then you quit, you go to another one, or you have different web experiences. You don't have a command tab experience yet. So if different people build different things, they're so separate. So I think this might be pending effort, and it just came up now. So I'm not like, my God, married to it. It could be a neat way to indicate going between environment. Anyway, just a thought, nothing Nothing heavy. Mark, please.
It's a slightly pedestrian point, but it sprang to mind the reference to swivel chairs. My remembrance being the swivel chairs came in when computers arrived on desks, and of course, who knew if these things would catch on? So the computer was off to one side, so everyone started getting lower back strain because they were always sitting across their chair, and now we all have wheelie chairs, which is fine. But it occurs to me that fine if you're say at home and in your own space and you have room. So, if Fabian was to turn around sitting in his chair, he probably wouldn't be operating on the person sat in the desk behind them in a normal office space where you're sat often on the spine. So one of the things it says to me is although when one says sort of, sitting down in a swivel chair, we're probably not necessarily thinking about making aggressive use of 360, because part of the 360 might be the person sitting behind you or a wall. So I sense it as being sort of about 180 degrees plus, because you're going to have a range of movement to do things and space that you can sort of visually use, but may not necessarily, it might be difficult to interact with. So it's just a point for us to consider before we make adopt another default, a bit like this thing about dealing with disabilities and things, is the assumption that you actually have a total 360 clear space around you.
Yeah.
I
Rob,
don't get motion sickness, which is really weird. And I have to say that on the ferry going over to Victoria, it was my 53rd crossing on that ferry in these last 20 years roughly. And so I never had seen that ferry move. I mean, it just simply just floated across the strait. This time going over, it was extremely windy and the ferry was rocking back and forth, and Andrew, James, and John were at the bow of the boat. And waves were crashing onto the bow of the boat, and James got soaked, and all the guys came upstairs, but inside the boat. But I'd never seen that happen before. And there's the guy sitting next to me was this older gentleman with his family, and he said, "I think I'm going to throw up." And I thought, can you get up and not sit next to me? You're going to throw up. Big giant guy. I think I'm going to throw up. Okay then. But I don't get motion sickness at all. It's the weirdest thing. But yeah. So VR I can stay in the headset forever, which is great.
maybe because you're always in motion, Deanie. You have so much energy. You should be powering the headset just through your own motion.
Maybe.
Yeah. Leon,
You are silenced.
there really should be a better mechanism for that on this after all these years.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. I'm
Don't worry.
really happy for you, Deanie, and I'm a bit jealous. You're really blessed for not being motion sickness. On the topic of motion sickness, I actually, sorry that I'm coming back to this page which Deanie showed. Like I'm actually thinking, like this visual impact thing. This sort of presents a bit of a catch-22 in VR, because here it says like certain people are sensitive to sudden visual transitions, and the thing is, if
Leon,
you,
I
Leon,
think
you're
we're
not
looking at your
showing that.
messenger instead of whatever you're trying to show us.
oh, okay, I wasn't sharing my screen.
You
I'm sharing
were,
your
but
own
you were just showing us your personal DMs.
They're very interesting though. Bring them back.
Now, Hungarian. Oh yeah, it's okay. Well, now you know everything. Okay. Okay. Do you see this?
There we go.
Okay, so this basically says certain people are sensitive to visual transitions, sudden ones. The problem with VR is you cannot really animate the camera, because if you do that, people will get sick. Like the gyroscope, their head basically controls the camera rotations and position. So if you teleport to something, yeah, you can do a fade out, fade in, but I'm just thinking about these things. I think there's a lot of things in a average VR experience which already sort of has this. So I'm almost thinking of there should be some kind of icons like you see with a movie, like this movie is for above 14 years old. Maybe aren't there some icons which show like, hey, this experience has sudden visual transitions or blinking lights, like selected stuff. I'm just thinking about it. Sorry for coming back to this again.
That's great, Leon. No, thank you for bringing that up. Know that those descriptions are not, we're not making things with flashing lights. We're not changing anything with flashing lights. It's just saying, hey, by the way, there's flashing lights. It's just letting people know. But I like the idea of icons. And so perhaps we can come up with icons for like an eye for eye, like click on eye, the icon eye, and you come up with those different descriptions, right?
Ooh,
So maybe
yeah.
more global icons because there's too many of them for an icon for each one of those. But if we look at the categories, then we could probably come up with an icon for that and then have a key for it. But they need to be intuitive enough for people to describe that. And yes, that looked just like that, Mark. That fairy. It was scary. It was scary. I had not seen it before like that. But yeah, I like that idea, Leon. Thank you for that. I mean, I think the way to think about the NEH project is if we get it, and we'll know in the next month or so if we do, month or so, if we do, we can use that as our proof of concept for us on this project for year 2.
There is a smaller thing on accessibility, and that is a lot of people have asked for a reversible dark mode for PDF views, which can be done really, really poorly. And of course, images become horrible if you just make them negative. But I'm not sure if I mentioned, sorry if I'm repeating, but a few weeks ago, I got an email from a user saying he's got visual issues. So he wanted that explained why we couldn't do it. And then I realized we have this lift mode, which takes the text and just presents it as text. So all we did, we changed a little bit of code, took my coders half an hour maybe. So when he's in dark mode on his Mac, he selects any text, spacebar, it goes into just the text, and it's white text on a dark, dark, dark background. Sometimes it's really, really easy to provide accessibility. Sometimes it isn't. But that was bizarre when these things came together. And also, AI comes into this, I think, because when you just lift text from a PDF, often you get issues with ligatures, breaks, and all of that nonsense. When we use normal ChatGPT 4.0 to turn it into a view mode, it works really well. It doesn't do any analysis. It just makes the text look normal. So far in my test, it really works. It's a bit slow. So that's why I'm looking into the best way that if you do that as a background process, then in the future, it's instant for the user. So that means Mark and Klaus can have their columns as many or as few as they want.
Well, doesn't that get, I mean, that's a really what my paper was hinting at is if we just stop writing for paper, which we don't do deliberately, but essentially we do because we know no better because it's what we're used to doing. So a lot of the problems are unwittingly self-inflicted by writing from a medium we're not actually using. So things can't be reflowed because we need to fit them into rectangles.
Yeah, I agree with that, of course. And as you know, that's why I invented Visual Meta. It's the smallest thing, but I'll still call it that because I have a PhD now, so I'm very special. But no, all right, Fabian, are you leaving? I'm just about to show something. All right, I'll show you again later, okay? All right, see you later.
I'm sure it will be amazing. Take care.
Bye. Bye. Yeah, Leon, please. Leon, if you're talking, can't hear you. I'm just trying to.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. Responding to Mark, why are we still writing on paper? Is it in our blood that we grow up with stories from books or fairy tales or emerald stone tablets? Is it maybe inside us that we can never get rid of this almost romantic idea of seeing a paper virtually or physically?
I don't think it's deliberate. I think it's just what we're used to, you know. So we would, you know, we would write on a sheet of paper, and then we had typewriters, and we wind our sheet of paper into that, and then we had digital typewriters on screen. So what else logically would you do but make a white rectangle and type your digital letters into your digital paper? And it's seamless. We know how to do it. We've hundreds of years of experience, and there are all sorts of gentle typographic notions and things that are useful for understanding. So I don't think it's deliberate. It's just it's as if we've, in a sense, we've just walked straight through a gateway without noticing, to the extent that I suspect most of us, I mean, I use paper as my short-term memory. So I scribble on backs of envelopes, and then when they get full, I just throw them in the bin. You know, because that's how my short-term memory goes. But most of the time, I hardly ever print anything, and if I do, it's probably something like local bureaucracy or something. So if I make documents, they're broadly all digital and will be all digital probably their entire life. So I'm surrounded by books. I'm not about to step away from print anytime soon, but that's not the issue. It's that if I'm writing, it's sort of quite hard. It's especially hard actually to write for a sort of effectively something that's just going to be shown in any form. If you actually do it in a white rectangle, it just makes it even harder because you're so used to writing onto paper. That's sort of what you do. It also means you do tend to get sucked into an unintentional effect of WYSIWYG, is that you actually spend a lot of time, unless you're quite adept, fiddling around with making it look right, for which you get nothing back. You know, that suddenly this, you know, this paragraph looks slightly different to that one, and then the next minute you're fiddling with tab stops and margins and stuff, which you don't care about really. In the moment of what you're doing, what you were trying to do is right. And it's interesting, I come to sort of see that a lot of people who write for whatever reason, whether it be a novelist or somebody who's just writing technical writing, whatever, a lot of them actually use either, you know, some people literally use a sort of typewriter simulator where you have a line running in the middle of the screen and the paper moves around, or they have something that has no style. So it's interesting. The more people who write a lot often do not use Word. You know, other word presses are available, but that class of tool, lots of us use them because we have them. They're given to us free normally, or free or minimal cost. We generally don't pay for them. So you also use the tool that you have at hand. So it's just a sort of gentle mental capture of intent, and therefore it actually needs us to make a positive move to start thinking outside that box. But it's definitely, you know, it's an either both. It's not that we need to sort of take all the old things out and destroy them. Far from it. And I don't think we're going to escape the need or the usefulness of text in its printed form for some while yet, because we haven't yet, for instance, come up with essentially the equivalent copy of record. So one of the reasons you're printing things out for, you know, the local council is that they can go and put it in a folder somewhere, because the system hasn't yet got to a point where you can give them an NFT or something.
Mark.
Yeah.
We agree on the issue of writing for non-paper medium, absolutely. So we need to have maybe a session on what that might mean. Like maybe even do that soon. Talking of writing, non-linear writing, I would like to share my screen. You can all see, right? Yeah, okay. So Dini, I did this for you. I'm just moving the zoom bar. You are my target user in this. I always find it easier to have a human target user rather than some kind of a use case user. And you are my target user because you are intelligent, knowledgeable, brilliant, but you're new to this particular software. So to guide someone like you into using it is what I've been working on. So I'm going to just do a 1 to 2 minute demo. You've kind of seen some of this, but now it actually works. Is the screen good enough that you can see the text at the bottom of the screen? Or is it a bit?
I can't read it, it's so small.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I will just tell you what they are. There's just 3 things at the bottom, and when you get open your test flight later, it should fit your screen, so it should be okay. So in the middle, it says view. It's changed. So if you can now choose to view map or outline. Oh my God, they have put Command W. Are they serious? It's supposed to be 2 Command M's. Okay, that'll close the window, so that's stupid. Anyway, we'll go to the map. That's all I wanted to show you today. So here's the map. You've seen it many, many times. So the new thing is quite simply, bottom left, it says show. You click on that and you get options for what to see. So if you now choose to see all the people, they're all selected like this. So the things are not new, but what is new is how you can now just click to see it, because I think that's really important, and you can learn over time the keyboard shortcuts. So now we've selected all the people, and we go to the right, which is layouts. We can do something like distribute vertical, and we can see the keyboard shortcut is V for the future. And then I do align left. Boom, now we're back to that. So to be able to quickly and easily do volume selections, I think is very, very useful. Something that they haven't been able to implement for today, but will have soon, is when you control click on a node, the option will be there is select all of the same category. So if you select one person, you've selected all the persons. Any questions or comments?
It'll be easier to know what to say once I start playing with it myself.
Yeah, I do look forward to hearing when you have it. But yeah, so far, just being able to have this, because even I, who designed the darn thing, forget some of the keyboard shortcuts. So, you know, that's a little bad. So I used you guys, I used you as an excuse to get them to do it for today. They finally managed to do it. So hopefully some of the other polishes will come soon. There is a major issue with some of the selection mechanisms and showing the connective lines. Once I have more about that, that's something more relevant to what Andrew is doing in the other map view. Something to learn from. But it most definitely is writing for non-paper medium. So it does do that thing.
It's really cool. It's really cool to see the visual meta visually.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't as such visual meta yet, but all of these things are defined, and that gets exported as a glossary, as I think most of you know. And to write a kind of, maybe we need a new word for glossary as well, because this is really for the user to figure out how things connect for them. And then exporting it as a glossary is very much a secondary thing. Yeah, I can see here, if I select the word concept, points to glossary, and it says, when a document is exported to PDF, the defined concepts become glossary terms. So it literally says it here. But as I keep growing these things, they always become messy. So the thing you've talked about, Mark, about screen real estate is so important. And that's why to be able to select things based on categories, at least, there should be more, is important. To do layouts based on criteria rather than just manually. You know, all these things become more and more important. And I think from what we've been talking about with XR and these types of environments is, what is a background? You know, how does a background, you know, how much should you see what's in the background? Or maybe we shouldn't have a background. Should it be a side ground, etc.
Before we end today, I'd like to mention I'm looking for travel grants. And I've been working with my development group, my research group to find them. And even looking as of this morning, just to see what new things have shown up. I found one that I'm going to look at more deeply, but I just dropped the link in the channel. Research grant funding from Eon Reality,
Looks
California.
really interesting.
And there's some money for travel here. So I'm going to look at this a little bit more carefully this afternoon. And it says 45 days from submission, which should be soon enough to get some funding. And so I may try to think of travel grant money coming from Europe. So if you help me kind of think through the numbers, I'd like to write down some data from you. If you were to travel from where you are currently to California, I mean to Vancouver, Washington, in the fall, because travel does drop a little bit in September, what would your flight be roughly? Can you drop it in the Slack channel? I mean, in the Zoom channel for me? Like, what would the cost of your ticket be to come here? Roughly.
When you say fall, Dini, are you talking really about the meeting? Because that's in November, which is the backside of Thanksgiving, which is another spike in prices, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you book it now, it won't be from Europe. It's not going to matter. It's only if you book in the United States.
No, okay, right here. Yep.
So we have plenty of time for this. It would be in September. I mean, in November. So if you put in how much money it would cost you to come here in November, there's plenty of time to apply for this if it's indeed what I think it is. And I can figure out what the cost of the hotel would be easily. And maybe have a bursary for the team and people that are presenting. So Frodo, that would answer your question this morning about can we fund this guy Lewis? I would like to think we fund our team first if you need funding, and then other people. I'd love to bring in the person that Frodo talked about today. I also want to bring Doug Rushkoff in. Some of these people would expect to be funded a little bit.
Dini,
So-
your effort and intelligence dealing with this is just so insanely appreciated. Just want to make that really clear. So thank you for
Yeah. I mean, this is what it takes. You're in a lab all these years. You have to always think about how you get the money to people. So you've got to tell me what you think it's going to cost to bring you over. Mark, I'm guessing from maybe England, it might be $1,500 round trip, roughly.
I'm literally just running a search at the moment because it's so long since I've.
Also, guys, especially Europeans here, some of us are thinking of spending some time in Silicon Valley before or after Future of Text to really spend our travel time just like I did last time. So obviously that wouldn't be covered even if we managed to get a grant, but at least getting stateside. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, get you here round trip and then set it up so it's maybe a week and a half long. So you come in and you've got time after the trip to go to California. That'd be on your own dime.
Yeah, exactly. Leon, what's up?
Yeah, just this is maybe not related to this thing, but I might also have some opportunities for Fabien and me for to basically travel to the US via a European fund, which we are already using. There are some rules to it, like you need to have an invite from an American institution or university or whatever. And then, yeah, up to X days can be funded, like the travel costs, accommodation, all these things. As long as it's sort of like matches a certain topic of the stuff you're researching. For example, accessibility would be could be a matching.
Mm-hmm. To respond to that, Leon, the invitation could come very easily from my university. So I could issue on letterhead an invitation. I've done this before for the yellow conferences that I've done. That would not be a problem. And you froze, so you may not be able to hear me. Okay. So 1,200.
That's from a very quick sort of web search, but I suspect I did put in the November dates. Because the other thing is when's your election? Isn't that November?
It's long before that. It's like it's
Oh,
early.
right.
But
Excessive.
but we don't. It'll be chaos.
Yes.
It won't go well.
Regime change and all that.
Well, I'm hoping that Biden gets elected, but if he does get elected, there's going to be chaos. If he doesn't get
Yeah.
elected, there'll be chaos. So we're not going
Yeah.
to win no matter what happens.
Yeah.
We're all kind of girding up for that right now.
Well, don't worry. I mean, we're about to go through our own versions. So
I've been
who
watching
knows?
yours. It does not look good.
Yeah.
And Macron is making a big mistake. I have to go on record saying.
Well, it's really. I mean, basically, it seemed a whole lot of people have just posted the keys through letterbox and walked off. I think is so what's happening in the government's here at the moment.
But I don't expect things to get really crazy until January, once again. So anyway, I'm gonna proceed as if everything's fine.
Mhm.
We're having an event. It's being funded by Sloan, but I am looking for travel grant money, and I'm also going to now that I'm back home and I've got this fire behind me from the EDHSI event, write the report, and then I'm also going to look for funding for the food, like during the day, because I'd like to hold on to the $3,500 for the dinner, the special dinner.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. That's Lena, that is brilliant. Not to finish this, but as an aside, because it's important. So I don't know if you've seen, Peter, I wrote in the comment here, you are good with the 30th for the human workshop, put in a link to how you can submit it. I'm also going to write a paper for human, which is what I initially intended, and then I went under Blue Sky because I'm just not very organized. Do you guys have anything you want me to write? And also, would you like to co-write the human paper with me? It is going to be simpler. We don't have that many days, but we have got the basic, we have the demo, we have the kind of the philosophy. What might it be? Any thoughts? And hello, Brandel. We're just looking at travel plans to America now, and we're looking at the submission of final papers for a subsection of the Hypertext conference called the Human Workshop. And we've talked about a lot of really cool topics, particularly hardware interactions in XR, such as Leon was mentioning, how about having a tab key to tab through the important items in an XR space? So yeah, that's us really. So any thoughts? We don't have that much time now. We should probably focus on the travel. But if you do have thoughts as to paper and topic, please do feel free to email me, text me, Slack me, X me, Twitter me. Yeah, that's it actually.
Also, if you're from the United States, please let me know what it would cost to get you here stateside. So the travel is different from different parts of the country. November will be more pricey because of the Thanksgiving holidays. But Peter, if you want to come in for this, and if you can't come in for it, what would cost you to come in? I know what the hotels are, so just give me flight information. Randall, the same for you. So I'm looking now at writing travel grants and trying to get some funding for travel.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm not sure about the gas money. We'll have to talk to Sloan again for that.
Andrew, if you complain about driving in from north of the campus, I'm going to scream.
Yeah. Where do you get $3 bills these days?
How about one burger for calories so you can walk?
I can print them. I print them. But sincerely, I'd like to get started on this part of our event. And so I'd like to also, Frodo, for you to look at the people that you're inviting. Some of these people may expect to get a little bit of travel money, and I'm thinking that would be like Doug Rushkoff. The last time I brought Doug to my city, it was $20,000 plus travel. And I raised it with a lot of people. I got $30,000 worth of donations from the community to bring him in.
Yeah, no,
He
it's
did a
great
great job. Everybody loved him. And it was worth it. It did a lot for the community to bring him here.
It is, yeah, no, Doug is wonderful and has been a wonderful supporter of all this work in various ways for a long time. I'm not really comfortable paying anyone to attend. I did pay Howard Rheingold once by accident. someone kind of co-invited him who kind of took over. And then Howard wrote me an email saying, I just got $1,000. I have no idea, but okay, thank you. That happened to have been sponsored by my colleague's husband, so I didn't actually spend any money on it. But this is more, we cover your costs, but if you're not interested, you don't need to come. That's okay. So yeah, that's good. And I just wanted to say, Brandel, Lewis Dartnell, who wrote Origins and Being Human, has said he's interested in coming. Those books are just ridiculously phenomenal, I think. And the fact that he wants to travel from London all the way across, if we just cover the airfare and hotel, is phenomenal. So now we just got to raise some more money. So yeah. See you later, Leon. I think we're all.
Bye bye, everybody. Thanks. Bye bye.
Andrew and I've got to buzz out in just a minute too.
Yeah. We all got to go. I just got an email from Klaus, but you saw that, right? So he confirmed 30th. Right, Brindle, how are you? And where are you? You look like you're somewhere different.
I'm in my bedroom. I tested positive for COVID, so I'm
Oh.
fairly under the weather.
Oh, that's why you look a
no.
bit tired.
Sorry.
How are you?
Yeah,
You said
through
weather.
the
What does that mean?
through the
Are you-
absolute worst of it. I was sort of mostly in and out of consciousness Thursday, Friday, and I've been sort of
Oh,
working my way back. But it's gonna be a long process. Just trying to take it as easy as possible to minimize the risk of any kind of longer term
Randall,
repercussions.
did you get all your shots? Is it worse? I mean, have you had your shot, all the vaxes?
I've had 5 or 6, something like that. I don't know about all, but yeah.
Half
I had
My symptoms. Oh, that's scary.
how's
Well,
your family? How's your wife and daughter?
my daughter's in New Zealand. My wife has managed to avoid it, so we have a bedroom with an ensuite. So I've just been in there for the last few days, and then if I walk through the house, we have dinner out in the backyard, and so I wear a mask on the way through the house. Yeah.
I'm so
But
sorry.
yeah, I wanted to call. I wanted to call in and to say I'm sorry for not being more active, but yeah, it's very exciting for the conference in November to be shaping up. I have I think I should be able to make it. I will be in Anaheim in September, end of September, but that doesn't have anything to do with these dates, so that seems like it should be able to work.
Great. That's great. Well, I'm going to buzz everybody. Good to see you, Rob. I'm glad you're back from your trip. I want to hear more about it.
We can talk offline sometime.
Okay. And everybody, hugs. I'll see you later. Mark, it was great working with you. I'd love to see the final version of your paper. Would you mind sending me the PDF?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can do that.
I'd love to see it. Thank you. All right, bye, everybody.
Mark, you can put it on Slack, right?
Yeah, there's no real reason I can't. I mean, under the usual proviso that it's essentially it's a private preprint, but I'm not worried about anyone here. And I think a fair number have seen it, but no, I can pop it in. I can pop it in a Slack. Yeah.
So, Randall, how are you feeling now? You said last week was awful.
Yeah. Still not amazing. But I able to concentrate quite a bit more, and have been just sitting around. Really haven't done anything other than I did binge watch all of Foundation in Apple Vision Pro, and that was an interesting experience in headphones and this egg chair.
Considering how you're feeling, that must add an extra layer to the kind of immersion, right?
Yes, it's fairly surreal as an experience, but something that to be recommended, I think.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, earlier we talked about all kinds of interaction mechanism. We forgot COVID as being one. have your mind partially
Yes.
decomposed for VR?
Yes. Well, that's one of the things that disability training at Apple is pretty rigorous. And one of the things they say is that we all are, everybody experiences disability at some point in their lives, and a lot of disabilities are transient. And so there are motor disabilities, there are visual disabilities, there are cognitive disabilities, and COVID would certainly count at least among few of them, if not most, in terms of the impact on people's capacity to exert themselves or to concentrate and other things like that. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to speculate on in terms of the impact and
Yeah.
what people should do about it.
One of the things we talked about earlier is how it's disability is maybe not the right word, because of course in some cases, like, you know, I have a friend who's missing a hand, of course that is a disability, but also just individual differences. Like I mentioned how in Author we of course have a light and a dark mode. I asked a friend, oh, how gray should the background go, and we completely disagreed. Our eyes as relatively regular people had completely different ideas of what was comfortable. So just to really recognize and build in support for customizing it. And that's where I got this neat recollection that my paper on high resolution thinking has to map onto the body in high resolution, or the brain at least. So yeah, there's a world of opportunity in XR that is about personalization, not just experience, right?
Yes, yeah, the things that you conjure have to be relatable and personal in a way that renders them meaningful. One of the things in the video in the Foundation series is people doing a lot of very subtle gestures and having them be encoded to a very large and wide array of intents. And that's plausible in the same way that just pinching and looking in different places can be encoded. But what's missing from an exterior context is the ability to be able to infer what the composite of orientations actually turns that intent into. Like when you can't see somebody's eyes when they're using Apple Vision Pro, then the fact that they're pinching like that is sort of similarly opaque in terms of the sort of movie magic of somebody waving their hand and it doing the right thing every time. And so thinking about what are all of the signals that a given person is composing to be able to convey their specific intention is just interesting. Like what are the things that we will be able to package up together to say, this is what I mean. I don't think that makes sense.
No, I think it does make a lot of sense, because people in the room, one of the things I absolutely think Apple has to do is when you're recording or taking a picture, make it more obvious. I've been in the crowd show doing pictures. You know, the waitress there, she wanted to know what it's like. I took a picture of her. All she could see was the white go, it went white a little bit. At some point, there's going to be, I see here Rob is talking about Washington Post and New York Times criticism of the Vision Pro. At some point, it's going to have the Robert Scoble in the shower moment. It really should have a red dot on it blinking when it's recording. Because it is such an example of what you're saying. See you later, Peter. Look forward to Wednesday. Of how
See you, Peter.
people need to, you know, if they're in the room with someone with a headset, and you know they're just doing this. Yeah, you're right. That doesn't really give context to what that's about. Sometimes you want to be private, but sometimes it's not appropriate.
Yeah. There's politeness. There's sort of legibility in the context of social learnability. One of the things that, as we saw together when we were at the Mac at 40, was people talking about the fact that when there's a single click, when there's a single mouse button, you can tell if you hear a click, then you can know what it was. I mean, they could have fixed that by changing the auditory sort of signature of both of the clicks, so that they had separate timbres, in the
Mm.
same way that you have, you know, different sort of clanks and clunks and kind of certain horns and engine sounds. But they didn't have to think about that at the time. But yeah, like there's a lack of not social deference, but like social awareness of what is what people are obligated to do in order to sort of submit themselves to a public within Apple Vision Pro right now. It's not something that like the political benefit is all for the wearer rather than for the participants around it. And the iSight is a concession to that, but I think we need to understand that that only exists in a like that's only appropriate in a fairly narrow band where people can kind of carve out situations like that where everybody's comfortable, or where there's such a distinction of power that everybody who is sort of coexisting with a powerful person with the cool expensive headset oughtn't mind. And that explains a lot of places, especially in Silicon Valley, but not all places.
Indeed. We have to wind down, I'm afraid. I'm glad you're better. Awful. I thought COVID was basically done here in England. We don't hear about it anymore. So it's awful that you got something that went through 5 shots as well.
Yeah, no, it's there's a big upsurge in the Bay Area at the moment.
Scary. Well,
So be careful, Rob.
yeah, Rob, do be careful. Look, yeah, I gotta go. I have family commitments now. We're gonna go cheap new Chinese restaurant, which is nice. I look forward to taking you all there someday. Brandel, I have a
Lovely.
headset. I have a text system. If you want to talk about anything, even if you get randomly bored and you've gone through all your other friends, just text me. Right? When you're in this kind
Cool,
of
thank
hell, it sometimes you just need to talk. I get that.
Yeah, no, that's very kind. That's very kind. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
I would say my family has COVID
No, sorry to hear that.
in San Francisco, so yeah, I know there's a surge.
Well,
Yeah,
awful. Really good to see you. Stay safe. Wednesday is going to be another day.
indeed, indeed. All right,
Bye, guys.
so good to see you all.
Be
Bye.
back. Get well, Brendel.